The widow's basket slipped from her numb fingers, scattering kindling across the frozen ground as she stumbled against the cottonwood tree, realizing she had not eaten in 2 days, and the world was spinning into darkness. Florence Calloway came to with rough hands gripping her shoulders and a deep voice cutting through the fog in her mind. "Madam, can you hear me? When did you last eat?" She blinked up at a face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, the afternoon sun creating a halo around the stranger's head. Strong features, weathered by sun and wind, eyes the color of creek water in summer. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. "Easy now," he said, his voice gentler. He shifted her weight against his chest and brought a canteen to her lips. Slow sips. The water was cool and tasted faintly of metal, but it was the finest thing Florence had experienced in weeks. She drank greedily until he pulled it away. "Not too much at once or you will be sick," he said. "Let me help you up." He lifted her as though she weighed nothing, one arm beneath her knees and the other supporting her back. Florence's cheeks burned with shame. She was 23 years old and being carried like a child by a complete stranger in the woods outside Kearney, Nebraska. It was 1882, and she had been a widow for 8 months, but the humiliation of her circumstances had not lessened with time. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "I am sure you can, but you are not going to right now." He began moving through the trees toward where she could see a horse tied to a low branch. "Where is your home?" "The Miller place, half a mile that direction." She pointed with a trembling hand. He nodded and whistled. The horse, a fine bay gelding, lifted its head and nickered softly. The stranger settled her into the saddle, then swung up behind her with easy grace. His arms came around her to grasp the reins, and Florence found herself enclosed in warmth and the scent of leather and pine. "I am Franklin Emerson," he said as they began moving. "I own the Double E Ranch about 3 miles northwest of town. Florence Calloway." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I appreciate your help, Mr. Emerson, but I was managing fine. Were you?" There was no mockery in his tone, just a quiet observation that made her eyes sting with tears she refused to shed. The ride to the small cabin she had shared with Thomas was mercifully short. Franklin dismounted and lifted her down with the same careful strength. He tied his horse to the porch rail and opened the door for her. The interior was neat but sparse. Florence had sold most of their belongings over the past months to buy food and keep the small farm running. Thomas had died in early spring from pneumonia, leaving her with 40 acres of mediocre land, a milk cow, a dozen chickens, and debts she had no way to repay. Franklin's gaze swept the room, taking in the empty shelves and cold stove. His jaw tightened. "When did you last have a proper meal?" "I had some eggs yesterday morning," she said, which was technically true, though she had given most of them to the children at church and kept only one for herself. "Stay here." He went back outside and returned a moment later with saddlebags slung over his shoulder. He moved to her stove and began building a fire with practiced efficiency, using the last of her kindling. "Mr. Emerson, you do not need to do this," Florence said, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. "Clearly I do." He glanced at her and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Not pity exactly. Something deeper. Understanding, perhaps. "Sit down before you fall down." She sank into one of the 2 chairs at her small table, watching as he worked. From his saddlebags he produced coffee, salt pork, and a cloth bundle that proved to contain fresh bread. Within minutes, the cabin was filled with the sizzle of meat in the pan and the rich aroma of coffee brewing. "You carry a lot of supplies when you ride out," Florence observed. "I was planning to be gone overnight, checking fence lines on the eastern section." He flipped the pork expertly. "Lucky I decided to cut through this way." Florence was not sure she believed in luck anymore, but she was grateful nonetheless. When he placed a plate in front of her, piled high with meat and bread and a steaming cup of coffee beside it, she had to blink back tears. "Thank you," she managed. "Eat," he said simply, settling into the other chair with his own plate. They ate in silence. Florence tried to pace herself, but the food was so good and she was so hungry that she cleaned her plate faster than was ladylike. Franklin said nothing, just refilled her coffee and cut her another thick slice of bread. "Your husband," he said finally. "I heard Thomas Calloway passed last spring. I am sorry for your loss. Did you know him? We met a few times in town. He seemed a decent man." Thomas had been decent in his way. 20 years older than Florence, he had married her when she was barely 18 and fresh off the train from Pennsylvania, answering his advertisement for a wife. He had not been unkind, but neither had there been much warmth between them. He had wanted a helpmate, and she had wanted security. They had both been disappointed. "He was," she said quietly. Franklin studied her for a long moment. "What will you do now? I have the farm. I will manage." "The farm is barely 10 tillable acres, and from what I saw riding in, the soil is poor. The cabin needs repairs before winter sets in proper. You have no horse, no wagon, and unless I miss my guess, no money to hire help." Each word was a stone added to the weight already crushing her chest. "I am aware of my situation, Mr. Emerson. I meant no offense." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving her face. "I have a proposition for you." Florence stiffened. She had heard propositions before, from men in town who saw a young widow as easy prey. "I am not interested in that kind of arrangement." His eyebrows rose. "What kind of arrangement do you think I am suggesting?" "The kind where I trade my virtue for security." To her surprise, Franklin laughed, a deep, genuine sound that transformed his stern features. "Lord, woman, you do not mince words. I appreciate that, but no. I am talking about honest work for honest wages." Heat flooded her cheeks. "Oh, I need someone to manage my household. My housekeeper, Maria, passed away 2 months ago. Since then, the house has been falling into chaos. I have 8 men working for me full-time, and during roundup and branding, we get up to 20. They need feeding and the house needs tending. Maria used to handle all of that, plus the garden, the chickens, the dairy work. I have been trying to manage it myself along with running the ranch, and it is not working. You want to hire me as your housekeeper, and cook, and whatever else needs doing around the place. Room and board included, plus $20 a month. $20 was more than generous. It was extravagant. Why? Why what? Why offer so much? You could hire someone for half that, and there are women in town who need work." Franklin was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup between his large hands. "Because I saw you collapse in the woods, alone. Gathering kindling you will need to stay alive through winter. Because your cupboards are bare, and you have been giving away what little you have to others who need it. Because when I offered you help, your first instinct was to refuse it, which tells me you have pride and strength, both of which I respect. And because Maria would haunt me from her grave if I left you here to starve, when I have the means to help." His honesty disarmed her. Florence looked down at her empty plate, at the crumbs of the best meal she had eaten in months. Pride warred with practicality. She could stay here, slowly selling off everything she owned until there was nothing left. And then what? Or she could accept his offer and at least have a chance to save some money, to perhaps start over somewhere. "What about my property here?" she asked. "Keep it. Work for me through the winter, and come spring, we can discuss what you want to do. Maybe you will want to return here. Maybe you will want to sell it. Either way, at least you will have money in your pocket and meat on your bones." Florence took a shaky breath. All right, I accept your offer. Franklin nodded, something like relief crossing his face. Good. Can you be ready to leave in an hour? An hour. No point in waiting. It will be dark soon and the temperature is dropping. Better to get you settled before nightfall. It was practical, Florence told herself as she packed her few belongings into 2 worn carpet bags. Practical and sensible. She was not running away from the little cabin with its memories of loneliness. She was not fleeing into the unknown with a stranger whose strong hands and kind eyes made something flutter in her chest that she had never felt with Thomas. She was surviving. That was all. Franklin helped her secure the cabin and tend to her cow and chickens. I will send a couple of my men over tomorrow to transport the animals and check that everything is secure, he said. Your livestock can join mine, and we will count their produce toward your wages. It was more generosity than she deserved, but Florence was learning not to argue with him. She climbed onto his horse, settled once more in the circle of his arms, and let him guide them through the failing light toward the Double E Ranch. The ranch house appeared as they crested a rise, and Florence caught her breath. It was larger than she had expected, a 2-story structure of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around the front and side. Outbuildings dotted the property, a barn, a bunkhouse, a smokehouse, corrals, and fencing stretching into the distance. Cattle grazed on the hills beyond, dark shapes against the sunset. It is beautiful, she said softly. It is home. Franklin's voice held a note of pride. My father built the original cabin 20 years ago. I have been adding to it as the herd grows. He rode up to the main house and dismounted, then helped her down. Her legs were unsteady and she swayed. His hands steadied her, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. Are you all right? Just tired, she admitted. Let me show you to your room. You can rest before dinner. The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior. Wide plank floors, solid furniture, windows that let in the last rays of sunlight. But Franklin had not been exaggerating about the chaos. Dishes were piled in the kitchen, dust covered every surface, and the smell of stale food lingered in the air. I know it is a mess, Franklin said, following her gaze. The men try to help, but ranch work keeps them busy from dawn to dusk. I have seen worse, Florence lied. He led her upstairs to a small bedroom at the end of the hall. It was clean at least, with a simple bed covered in a colorful quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a window overlooking the barn and pastures beyond. After the cramped cabin, it felt luxurious. This was Maria's room, Franklin said. I hope that does not trouble you. Not at all. Florence set down her bags, running her hand over the quilt. The stitching was beautiful, tiny, perfect crosses in a pattern of stars. She made that herself. Took her 2 years. Franklin's voice was soft. She would want you to have it. Tell me about her. She was my father's wife, my stepmother, though I never thought of her that way. She just was Maria, fierce and kind and stubborn as a mule. She taught me to read, how to treat people with respect, how to make the best biscuits in 3 counties. He smiled, lost in memory. My father passed 5 years ago. She stayed on, said this was her home and I would have to burn the place down to get rid of her. Then her heart gave out in her sleep. She was 68. I am sorry, Florence said. So am I. He cleared his throat, straightening. Rest for a bit. I will make us some supper. Absolutely not. You hired me to cook and I will start earning my keep tonight. Franklin studied her and she met his gaze steadily. Finally, he nodded. All right, but just something simple tonight. You are still recovering. They went downstairs together and Florence surveyed the kitchen with growing determination. It was a disaster, but it was a fixable disaster. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. Franklin tried to help, but she shooed him away. You have ranch work to do, I am sure. Let me handle this. It is nearly dark. The work can wait. Then sit and stay out of my way." He laughed and settled at the kitchen table, watching as she moved around the space. Florence found herself hyper-aware of his gaze as she worked, sorting through the supplies in the pantry and cold cellar. There was plenty to work with, at least. She made a simple stew from salt beef and vegetables, and biscuits from the flour and lard she found. As she cooked, they talked. Franklin told her about the ranch, about the challenges of the cattle business, about his plans to expand the herd in the spring. Florence told him about Pennsylvania, about coming west as a mail-order bride, about the shock of finding out that the frontier was nothing like the romanticized stories in the magazines back east. "You regret coming?" he asked. Florence considered the question as she stirred the stew. "I regret marrying a stranger for security, but I do not regret leaving Pennsylvania. There was nothing for me there. No family, an aunt who made it clear I was a burden. My parents died when I was 15. There was a small inheritance, but my aunt managed it, and by the time I was 18, she said it was gone. I think she spent it, but I could never prove it. When Thomas's advertisement appeared in the paper, she encouraged me to answer it. I think she was relieved to be rid of me. That is a hard way to grow up. It taught me to rely on myself." Florence pulled the biscuits from the oven, golden and perfect. "Taught me not to expect much from people." "Some people," Franklin said quietly, "not all people." Their eyes met across the kitchen, and Florence felt that flutter again, stronger this time. She looked away quickly, busying herself with setting the table. The stew was good, if she said so herself, and Franklin ate with the same focused efficiency he seemed to bring to everything. When he had finished, he leaned back with a satisfied sigh. "That is the best meal I have had since Maria died," he said. "You just earned your wages twice over. It was just stew. It was a hot meal made with care, and that makes all the difference." He stood and began gathering the dishes. "Leave those, I will clean up. Florence, you collapsed in the woods this afternoon. You need rest. I need to work." She took the dishes from his hands, her fingers brushing his. The contact sent a jolt through her that she tried to ignore. "Please, let me do my job." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but tomorrow I will introduce you to the men and show you how things work around here. For tonight, just do what you can and then sleep." "Yes, sir." "Franklin," he corrected. "Just Franklin." After he left, Florence washed the dishes and tidied the kitchen, then climbed the stairs to her new room. She was exhausted, but it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from useful work rather than despair. She changed into her nightgown and slipped between the sheets, pulling Maria's quilt up to her chin. Through the window, she could see the dark shape of the barn and the stars blazing overhead, more stars than she had ever seen in her life. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and closer, she heard the low of cattle settling for the night. She thought of Franklin Emerson, with his strong hands and gentle voice, his unexpected kindness to a stranger. She thought of how natural it had felt to cook in his kitchen, to sit across the table from him, to talk about nothing and everything. It meant nothing, she told herself firmly. He was her employer. She was his housekeeper. That was all it could ever be, all it should ever be. She was a widow who had barely known affection in her marriage, and he was a successful rancher who could have his pick of women. But as she drifted off to sleep, she could not quite shake the memory of his arms around her on the horse, the warmth of his body at her back, the feeling of being safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. Morning came early at the Double E Ranch. Florence woke to the sound of men's voices and the clang of the breakfast bell. She dressed quickly in her work dress and apron, pinned up her dark hair, and hurried downstairs. Franklin was already in the kitchen, trying to make coffee. The result was more mud than beverage. "Good morning," she said, taking the pot from his hands. "Let me," He looked relieved. "The men will be here any minute expecting breakfast. Then I better get started." It was a trial by fire, cooking for 8 hungry ranch hands on her first morning, but Florence threw herself into the work with determination. She fried salt pork and eggs, made a massive batch of biscuits, and set out butter and preserves. The coffee she made was strong and hot, the way working men liked it. The ranch hands filed in as the sun rose, stomping their boots and calling greetings to Franklin. They stopped short when they saw Florence at the stove. "Boys, this is Florence Calloway," Franklin said. "She is the new housekeeper and cook. You will treat her with the same respect you would have shown Maria." The men nodded, removing their hats. They were a rough-looking bunch, weathered and scarred by hard work, but their manners were surprisingly good. They introduced themselves. John, called Red for his shock of copper hair. Samuel, a quiet man with kind eyes. Robert, the youngest, barely 19 and eager as a puppy. Henry, Tom, William, James, and Peter, names she struggled to attach to faces in the rush. They ate like starving wolves, packing away massive quantities of food and praising everything with genuine enthusiasm. Florence found herself smiling despite her nervousness. "Best biscuit since Maria passed," Red said through a full mouth. "Begging your pardon for saying so, boss, but your cooking has been something terrible," Franklin laughed. "No offense taken. It is the truth." After breakfast, the men headed out to their work, and Florence began the monumental task of properly cleaning the house. Franklin tried to help until she pointed out that he was in her way. "I am trying to be useful," he protested. "You are useful, out there," she pointed toward the door. "Running your ranch, let me run your house." He held up his hands in surrender. "Yes, madam," but he did not leave immediately. He lingered in the doorway, watching as she tied a kerchief over her hair and began hauling water for scrubbing. "Florence," she turned. "Yes, thank you for being here, for taking this on. You are paying me well to do it, still, thank you." After he left, Florence attacked the house with fierce energy. She scrubbed floors and washed windows, beat rugs and dusted furniture, sorted through cupboards and organized the pantry. As she worked, the house began to transform, revealing its bones beneath the neglect. It was a good house, well built and thoughtfully designed. She could see Maria's touch everywhere. In the herb garden gone to weeds outside the kitchen door, in the precise organization of the pantry shelves, in the curtains that someone had sewn with care. By midday, she had the downstairs presentable and had started on the upstairs. She was scrubbing the hallway floor when she heard a horse approach. Through the window, she saw a wagon pull up, driven by Red, with her cow and chicken coop loaded in the back. She met him outside. "Thank you for bringing them." "Boss's orders, madam." "Where do you want them?" Florence helped him settle the cow in the barn and the chickens in the existing coop, which already housed a few dozen birds. Her small flock looked scrawny in comparison to Franklin's healthy hens. "Anything else you need, Mrs. Calloway?" Red asked. "Just Florence, please. And no, thank you." He tipped his hat and headed back to work, and Florence returned to the house. She made a simple lunch of cold meat and bread, not knowing when the men would come in, then continued her cleaning. Franklin appeared mid-afternoon, dusty and tired. He stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, taking in the transformation. "You have been busy." There was a lot to do. Florence wiped her hands on her apron. "Are you hungry? I have lunch ready. I could eat." He washed his hands at the pump outside, then sat at the now clean table while she served him. "Florence, you did not need to do all this in one day. Better to do it all at once. Now I can focus on maintaining it rather than fighting through the mess." He ate slowly, studying her. "When do you rest?" "When the work is done." "The work is never done on a ranch. You need to pace yourself." "I will be fine. You fainted yesterday." I was weak from hunger yesterday. Today I am well fed and capable of working." They locked eyes, and Florence saw something shift in his expression. Not anger, but concern, deep and genuine. "I did not bring you here to work yourself to exhaustion," he said quietly. "I brought you here because you needed help and I needed help, and it seemed like we could help each other. But not if you push yourself until you collapse again." His words, gentle but firm, cracked something in her chest. When was the last time anyone had cared whether she pushed herself too hard? Thomas had expected her to manage the farm and the house without complaint. Her aunt had treated her like an unpaid servant, but Franklin was looking at her like her well-being actually mattered. "I will try to pace myself," she said, her voice unsteady. "Good." He finished his meal and stood. "I will be within shouting distance if you need anything. Tonight after dinner I want you to sit down and rest. That is an order from your employer." "Yes, sir." "Franklin," he reminded her with a small smile, and then he was gone. Florence continued working, but slower now, thinking about what he had said. Thinking about the way he looked at her, with a respect and concern that made her feel valued in a way she never had before. By dinner time, she had the house in order and a hearty meal of roast chicken and vegetables ready. The men filed in, tired from a day of hard work, and the meal passed with easy conversation and laughter. Florence served them and ate her own portion standing at the stove, too aware of being the only woman in a house full of men to sit at the table. After dinner, the men headed to the bunkhouse, and Franklin helped her clean up despite her protests. "Two pairs of hands work faster than one," he said, and she could not argue with that. They worked in comfortable silence, falling into an easy rhythm of wash and dry. When the last dish was put away, Franklin poured them each a cup of coffee and nodded toward the sitting room. "You promised me you would rest." The sitting room was cozy, with a stone fireplace and comfortable chairs. Franklin built up the fire while Florence sank gratefully into one of the chairs, her feet aching. He settled into the chair across from her, stretching his long legs toward the fire. "Tell me about your plans for the ranch," she said. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I am curious. Because I live here now and want to understand the place." So he told her, and she listened, watching the firelight play across his features as he spoke of his dreams for the Double E. He wanted to improve the quality of his herd through selective breeding, to expand his grazing land, to perhaps start raising horses as well as cattle. He spoke with passion and knowledge, and Florence found herself drawn in, asking questions, offering observations. "You know more than most people about ranching," he said finally. "Thomas tried to teach me, but he did not have much success with farming. The land was poor and he was not good at planning, but I paid attention. I like to understand how things work." Maria was the same way. She read every book on ranching and farming she could get her hands on. My father used to joke that she knew more about cattle than he did. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. Franklin stared into the fire. "She and my father could not have children of their own. I think it pained her, but she never complained. She poured all that love into this ranch, into me, into the men who worked here. Everyone who knew her loved her. You miss her. Every day." He looked at Florence and his expression was raw. Coming into an empty house after she died was the hardest thing. The silence. I never realized how much life she brought to this place until she was gone. "I am sorry I cannot replace her. I am not asking you to. No one could replace Maria." He paused. "But having you here, having life in the house again, it helps. More than I expected it to." The weight of his words hung between them. Florence did not know what to say, so she said nothing, just held his gaze across the firelight. Finally, Franklin stood. "You should get some sleep. Morning comes early." "Good night, Franklin." "Good night, Florence." She climbed the stairs to her room, her mind churning. This was her employer. She was his housekeeper, that was all, but her heart was not listening to the practical warnings of her mind. Her heart was noticing how kind he was, how handsome when he smiled, how safe she felt in his presence. It was dangerous, these feelings. She had learned with Thomas that marriages without love were cold, lonely affairs. What would it be like to be loved by a man like Franklin Emerson? To be cherished, protected, desired. She could not let herself think that way. She was here to work, to earn money, to rebuild her life. Romance was not part of the arrangement, but as the days turned into weeks, it became harder and harder to remember that. Florence fell into the rhythm of ranch life with surprising ease. She rose before dawn to make breakfast, spent her days cooking and cleaning and managing the household, and fell into bed exhausted each night. It was hard work, but satisfying in a way her life with Thomas had never been. The ranch hands treated her with unfailing courtesy, and she grew to know each of them as individuals. Red was loud and cheerful, always ready with a joke. Samuel was steady and reliable, the one the others turned to in a crisis. Young Robert followed Franklin around like a shadow, eager to learn everything about ranching. And Franklin himself was a constant, reassuring presence. He checked on her frequently, making sure she had everything she needed, helping with the heavier chores, sitting with her by the fire in the evenings to talk about the day. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his mother who died when he was young, about the challenges of building a successful cattle operation in Nebraska's unpredictable climate. She told him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, about her dreams of becoming a teacher before her parents died, about the books she loved to read. "There is a whole shelf of books in the study," Franklin said one evening. "Maria's collection. You are welcome to read any of them." Florence discovered the books the next day and spent her rare free moments immersed in stories of adventure and romance, of distant places and grand emotions. When Franklin found her reading one evening, curled in a chair by the fire, he smiled. Maria would be glad her books are being read again. November gave way to December, and the weather turned bitter. Snow fell, blanketing the ranch in white. Florence baked bread and pies, made hearty stews and roasts, kept the fires burning and the house warm. She darned the men's socks, mended their clothes, and even cut young Robert's hair when it got too shaggy. "You are taking care of all of us," Franklin observed one evening. "That is what I am here for. Still, we are lucky to have you." The way he said it, the warmth in his eyes, made her breath catch. She looked away quickly, focusing on her mending. "Florence." "Yes, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. He was standing closer than usual, and his expression was intense. "I want to ask you something, but I do not want to make you uncomfortable." Her heart was pounding. "What is it? Would you come to the Christmas social with me? It is in town next week, and I thought, that is, if you wanted." He was nervous, she realized with wonder. Franklin Emerson, confident rancher, was nervous asking her to a social. "As your housekeeper?" she asked carefully. "As my companion?" His eyes searched hers. "As someone I enjoy spending time with and would like to spend more time with if you are willing." "Franklin, I do not know if that is wise." "Why not?" "Because I work for you, because people will talk, because I am a widow who has been here less than 2 months. I do not care what people say. Do you? I care about propriety. I care about my reputation, such as it is." "Your reputation is spotless. You have been working hard, attending church, living quietly. No one could say anything against you." He reached out, gently taking her hand. "I am not asking you to compromise yourself. I am asking you to let me court you properly. Court me." Her voice came out as a whisper. "I know it is fast. I know we have not known each other long. But Florence, I have not stopped thinking about you since I found you in those woods. Every day you have been here, every conversation we have had, every smile you have given me has only made my feelings stronger. I am falling in love with you, and I need to know if there is any chance you might feel the same way." Florence's eyes filled with tears. "Franklin, I am damaged goods. A widow with nothing to her name, you could have any woman you wanted. I want you." He cupped her face gently. "Just you, if you will have me." "I am afraid," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of this. Of caring for someone and being hurt. My marriage was not happy, Franklin." Thomas was not cruel, but he was cold. He never looked at me the way you are looking at me right now. I do not know how to be loved. Then let me teach you. His thumb brushed away a tear on her cheek. "Let me show you how precious you are, how much you deserve to be cherished. Give me a chance, Florence, please." She should say no. She should be practical, sensible, protect herself. But when she looked into Franklin's eyes, she saw nothing but sincerity and hope and the promise of something beautiful. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will go to the social with you." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Florence let herself rest against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "You will not regret this, I promise." The week leading up to the Christmas social passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Franklin was more attentive than ever, bringing her small gifts, wildflowers he found despite the snow, a new book from the general store in town. The ranch hands noticed the shift between them and grinned knowingly, but they said nothing improper. "About time the boss courted someone," Red said to Florence one morning. "He has been alone too long." "Do not listen to Red," Samuel said quietly, "but he is right. Franklin is a good man, and he deserves happiness. So do you, if you do not mind me saying so." The night of the social, Florence dressed in her best gown, a deep blue dress that had been her wedding dress and that she had hardly worn since. She brushed her dark hair until it shone and pinned it up carefully, leaving a few curls loose to frame her face. When she came downstairs, Franklin was waiting in the sitting room, dressed in a clean shirt and jacket, his hair neatly combed. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Florence, you look beautiful." "Thank you." She felt her cheeks heat. "You look very handsome yourself." He helped her into her coat and led her outside to the wagon, which he had fitted with extra blankets for warmth. The ride into Kearney was cold but clear, the stars brilliant overhead. The social was held at the church hall, decorated with pine boughs and candles. Music spilled out into the night, fiddle and guitar and voices raised in song. Florence felt a flutter of anxiety as they approached. She had been to church services since arriving in Kearney, but always quietly, sitting in the back, leaving quickly. This was different. This was showing up on Franklin Emerson's arm, making a statement. But Franklin squeezed her hand reassuringly as they entered, and she drew strength from his presence. The hall was crowded with people, families and couples and groups of young people. Heads turned as they entered, and Florence felt the weight of curious stares. Franklin seemed not to notice, greeting people warmly and introducing her with pride in his voice. "This is Florence Calloway, my housekeeper. Florence, this is Mayor Thompson and his wife, Sarah." "We have seen you at church, my dear," Sarah Thompson said, her eyes kind. "It is good to see you looking so well. We heard about your difficult circumstances. Mr. Emerson has been very generous in offering me employment," Florence said carefully. "He has been positively cheerful these last few weeks," the mayor said, clapping Franklin on the shoulder. "I can see why now." They circulated through the crowd, and Florence met dozens of people, trying to remember names and faces. Some were openly friendly, others more reserved, clearly evaluating her and finding her wanting. But Franklin never left her side, his hand at the small of her back, his presence a shield against judgment. When the dancing started, he led her onto the floor. Florence had not danced since her wedding, but Franklin was a skilled partner, guiding her through the steps with ease. "You are good at this," she said, breathless. "Maria insisted I learn. She said no son of hers would be a clod on the dance floor. She taught you well." They danced 3 dances in a row until Florence was laughing and flushed with exertion. Then Franklin led her outside for some air away from the crowded hall. The night was cold and clear, their breath misting in the air. Franklin wrapped his coat around her shoulders. "Are you having a good time?" he asked. "Yes, a wonderful time." She looked up at him, this man who had changed her life so completely in just a few months. "Thank you for bringing me. Thank you for coming with me." He hesitated, then said, "Florence, I meant what I said before. I am falling in love with you." "No, that is not true. I have fallen." Completely, utterly, hopelessly. "Franklin, you do not have to say anything if you are not ready. I just needed you to know." But Florence was ready. She realized in that moment, standing in the cold Nebraska night with this good, kind man looking at her like she was something precious, that she was ready. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have since you carried me out of those woods. You made me feel safe, cared for, valued. You made me feel like I mattered. I did not know how much I needed that until you gave it to me." Franklin's face broke into a smile of pure joy. He cupped her face in his hands and leaned down, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to. She met him halfway, her lips finding his in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing hard, their foreheads resting together. "Marry me," Franklin whispered. "What? Marry me?" "I know it is fast, I know people will talk, but I do not care. I love you, Florence Calloway, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much. Franklin, we have only known each other a few months. I know. And if you want to wait, we will wait. But I know what I want, and I want you. As my wife, my partner, the mother of my children if we are so blessed. I want to wake up every morning with you beside me and fall asleep every night holding you. I want to build a life with you, Florence. Please say yes." Florence thought of her empty years with Thomas, of the loneliness and the cold practicality of their arrangement. She thought of the life Franklin was offering her, full of warmth and love and purpose. She thought of how much she had changed since that day in the woods, how she had blossomed under Franklin's care and attention. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." Franklin lifted her off her feet, spinning her around, his laughter joining hers. Then he was kissing her again, deeper this time, and Florence felt like she was flying. They went back inside to the social, and Franklin announced their engagement to everyone present. There were cheers and congratulations, some surprised murmurs, but mostly genuine happiness for them both. Sarah Thompson hugged Florence warmly. "I can see how happy you make each other," she said. "That is all that matters." They stayed until the social ended, dancing and laughing and accepting the well wishes of their neighbors. On the ride home, Florence was curled against Franklin's side, his arm around her shoulders. "How long do you want to wait?" he asked. "For what?" "For the wedding," Florence considered. "Not long, maybe after Christmas. January. January is perfect. That gives us a few weeks to prepare, to post the bands, to do this properly." "Your men are going to be insufferable," Florence said, smiling. "They are going to be thrilled. They all love you already." When they arrived home, Franklin walked her to the door of the house. "I want to kiss you again," he said, "but I also want to do this right. You are living in my house, and I do not want anyone to question your honor." "I appreciate that," Florence said, "but Franklin—" "Yes, one more kiss would not hurt." He grinned and obliged, pulling her close and kissing her until her knees went weak. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were dark with desire. "January cannot come fast enough," he muttered. Florence laughed and slipped inside, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She had come to Nebraska as a desperate mail-order bride, had lived through a loveless marriage, had nearly starved in the aftermath of her husband's death. And now, impossibly, she was engaged to a wonderful man who loved her for herself. The next weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Florence sewed herself a new dress for the wedding, a beautiful cream-colored gown with lace at the collar and cuffs. The ranch hands pitched in to help prepare the house for the celebration that would follow the ceremony. Sarah Thompson organized the church ladies to provide food, and the whole town seemed caught up in the excitement. Franklin was attentive but respectful, courting her properly despite the fact that they lived under the same roof. They sat together by the fire in the evenings, talking and sometimes stealing kisses when no one was around. He told her his hopes for their future, his dreams of a family, of children running through the house, of growing old together on the ranch they both loved. "I want at least 4 children," he said one evening. "4," Florence laughed. "That is quite ambitious. Maria always said this house was built for a big family. I want to fill it with noise and chaos and love." "I would like that too," Florence admitted. She had always wanted children, but had been secretly relieved when she never conceived with Thomas. Bringing a child into that cold marriage had seemed wrong, but with Franklin, it felt right and natural and deeply desired. Christmas came, and Franklin gave her a beautiful necklace, a delicate chain with a small pendant in the shape of a star. "Because you are my star," he said, fastening it around her neck. "The light that guided me out of darkness." Florence gave him a new leather-bound journal. "For recording ranch business," she said, "and for writing down our story so our children will know how their parents met." He kissed her soundly, much to the amusement of the ranch hands who were gathered for Christmas dinner. On New Year's Eve, they sat by the fire together, just the two of them. The hands had gone into town for the celebrations there, giving them rare privacy. "In a few weeks, you will be my wife," Franklin said, his arm around her shoulders. "I can hardly believe my luck." "I am the lucky one," Florence said. "You saved my life, Franklin, not just from starvation but from the emptiness I was drowning in. You gave me purpose and hope and love." "We saved each other," he said. "I was just going through the motions before you came. Working, eating, sleeping, but not really living. You brought life back into this house, into my heart. You make everything better just by being here." They kissed as the clock struck midnight, welcoming the new year and their new life together. The wedding was planned for the 3rd Sunday in January. The weather cooperated, giving them a clear, cold day with brilliant sunshine sparkling on the snow. Florence woke early in the room she would not sleep in again after tonight, too excited and nervous to rest. Sarah Thompson arrived mid-morning to help her dress. She had become a friend over the past weeks, a warm and caring presence who had taken Florence under her wing. "You look absolutely radiant," Sarah said as she helped fasten the buttons on Florence's dress. "Franklin is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Florence said. "You are both lucky. That is how the best marriages work." They drove to the church together in the Thompsons' carriage. Franklin was already there, looking handsome and nervous in his best suit. His face lit up when he saw Florence coming down the aisle, and she felt tears prick her eyes at the love in his expression. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Reverend Matthews spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together through good times and hard. When it came time for the vows, Franklin's voice was strong and sure. "I, Franklin Joseph Emerson, take you, Florence Calloway, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, cherish you, protect you, and honor you all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner in all things, your comfort in sorrow, your celebration in joy. You are my heart, Florence, and I am yours forever. Florence's voice shook with emotion as she repeated her own vows. I, Florence Calloway, take you, Franklin Joseph Emerson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, support you, stand by your side through whatever may come. You saved me, Franklin, in every way a person can be saved, and I will spend the rest of my life showing you how grateful I am. I love you with all that I am. They exchanged simple gold bands, and when Reverend Matthews pronounced them man and wife, Franklin kissed her with such tender passion that the congregation applauded. The celebration afterward at the ranch house was joyous and loud. It seemed like half of Kearney had turned out to wish them well. There was music and dancing, an enormous feast that the church ladies had prepared, and toast after toast to the happy couple. Red stood up, swaying slightly with drink, and announced, "I knew it from the first day she came here. I told Samuel, I said, mark my words, the boss is smitten." And I was right. You say that about everyone, Samuel retorted, but he was smiling. Young Robert, blushing furiously, said, "Mrs. Emerson, I just want to say thank you for making the boss happy. We have not seen him smile this much in years." Florence's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Robert. Thank you all. You have made me feel so welcome here." As the afternoon wore into evening, guests began to depart, offering final congratulations. The ranch hands tactfully disappeared to the bunkhouse, giving Franklin and Florence privacy. Finally, they were alone in the house that was now truly their home. Franklin lifted Florence in his arms, carrying her up the stairs to the master bedroom. "I have been waiting for this moment for months," he said, setting her gently on the bed. "So have I," Florence admitted. He kissed her slowly, reverently, as though she were something precious and fragile. His hands were gentle as he helped her out of her dress, his touch sending shivers through her. Florence had never known tenderness like this, had never experienced the slow build of desire that came from being truly loved. "Are you all right?" Franklin asked, pausing. "If you need to stop, we can stop." "Do not stop," she whispered. "Please, Franklin, I want this, I want you." What followed was a revelation. Thomas had approached the marriage bed with cold duty, finishing quickly and leaving her feeling empty and used. But Franklin made love to her with patience and passion, paying attention to what made her gasp and sigh, bringing her pleasure she had not known existed. When it was over, he held her close, murmuring words of love against her hair. That was. Florence could not find the words. "It was perfect," Franklin finished for her. "You are perfect." They fell asleep tangled together, and Florence woke several times during the night to find Franklin watching her with wonder in his eyes. "I cannot believe you are really my wife," he said once. "I cannot believe I am lucky enough to be married to you," she replied. The first months of their marriage were blissfully happy. Florence threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, and Franklin courted her as though they were still engaged, bringing her flowers, surprising her with small gifts, always finding reasons to touch her and tell her he loved her. The ranch prospered under Franklin's management, and Florence discovered she had a knack for the business side of things. She began keeping the books, managing the finances, even offering suggestions about herd management that Franklin took seriously. "You have a good head for this," he said one evening, looking over the ledger she had organized. "Better than mine, if I am honest. I like puzzles, and ranching is just a series of puzzles to solve." "You are brilliant," he said, kissing her soundly. In April, Florence realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure, then told Franklin over dinner one evening, "I am pregnant." Franklin's fork clattered to his plate. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. I have all the signs." He was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around. "We are having a baby. Florence, we are having a baby." His joy was infectious, and Florence found herself laughing and crying at the same time. "You are happy?" "Happy. I am the happiest man alive." He knelt before her, placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I already love you so much." The ranch hands were equally thrilled by the news. They treated Florence like she was made of glass, rushing to help her with anything heavy, insisting she sit down and rest. "I am pregnant, not ill," she protested. "We know, but we are not taking any chances," Red said firmly. "That baby is going to need an army of uncles, and we aim to be around to meet him or her." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Florence bloomed, her face glowing with health and happiness. Franklin was endlessly solicitous, bringing her tea in the mornings, rubbing her feet when they swelled, reading to her from the newspaper and books in the evenings. As summer turned to fall, Florence's belly grew round and heavy. Franklin talked to the baby constantly, telling stories, singing songs, making plans. "If it is a boy, I thought we could name him Thomas," Franklin said one evening. "After your first husband, to honor his memory." Florence was touched by the gesture. "That is very kind, but I think I would rather look forward than back." "What about your father's name?" Charlie for short." Franklin considered. "I like that. And if it is a girl, Margaret after my mother, Maggie." "Perfect." In late November, Florence's labor began. It was long and difficult, and Franklin paced the downstairs like a caged animal while Sarah Thompson and the doctor attended her upstairs. When the baby's first cry split the air, Franklin took the stairs 3 at a time. He burst into the room to find Florence exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. "A boy," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Franklin, we have a son." He approached slowly, reverently, looking down at the tiny red face of his child. "He is perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Franklin had never held a baby before, but he took his son with careful hands, cradling him against his chest. The baby opened his eyes, deep blue like his mother's, and seemed to study his father's face. "Hello, Charlie," Franklin whispered. "I am your papa. I am going to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know. You and your mama are my whole world." The first years of Charlie's life were busy and exhausting and wonderful. Florence had never been happier, dividing her time between caring for her son and managing the household. Franklin was a devoted father, rising in the night to help with feedings, playing with Charlie for hours, showing him off to anyone who would look. "You are going to spoil him," Florence said, laughing, watching Franklin build an elaborate tower of blocks for their 1-year-old son. "That is my right as a father," Franklin replied without remorse. When Charlie was 18 months old, Florence realized she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to a daughter, Margaret Rose, in the spring of 1885. Maggie, as they called her, had Franklin's green eyes and Florence's dark hair, and she was a calm, happy baby who rarely cried. "2 perfect children," Franklin said, holding Maggie while Charlie played at his feet. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Florence said, leaning against his shoulder. The ranch continued to prosper. With Florence managing the finances and Franklin running the operations, the Double E became one of the most successful ranches in the region. They expanded their land holdings, improved their herd, and even began raising horses as Franklin had dreamed. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Charlie grew into a curious, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere. Maggie was more reserved, content to help her mother in the house and garden. In 1887, Florence gave birth to another son, Henry, and in 1889 a second daughter, Alice, 4 children, just as Franklin had wanted. The house was full of noise and chaos and love, exactly as he had imagined. Florence stood on the porch one evening in the summer of 1890, watching Franklin play with their children in the yard. Charlie, now 6, was teaching 4-year-old Maggie to throw a rope. Henry toddled after them, determined not to be left out, while Franklin held baby Alice on his hip. "Mama, watch," Charlie called, successfully roping a fence post. "I saw. That was wonderful," Florence called back. Franklin caught her eye and smiled, that special smile reserved just for her. After 8 years of marriage, he still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. Sarah Thompson climbed the porch steps, puffing slightly. She had become Florence's closest friend, a constant presence in their lives. "You have built something beautiful here," Sarah said, following Florence's gaze. "A true family." "I never thought I would have this," Florence admitted. "When Thomas died, when I was alone and starving, I could not imagine being this happy. You deserve every bit of it, dear. You and Franklin both." That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Franklin found Florence in their bedroom, brushing out her hair. "You ever think about that day I found you in the woods?" he asked. "Sometimes. It feels like a lifetime ago. You were so thin, so fragile. I was terrified you would slip away before I could help you. You did more than help me. You gave me a life worth living." Franklin came to stand behind her, taking the brush from her hand and running it gently through her long hair. "I fell in love with you that day. Did you know that? The moment I saw you, even unconscious, I felt something shift in my chest, like I had been waiting for you my whole life." Florence met his eyes in the mirror. "I fell in love with you too. With your kindness, your strength, the way you saw me as a person worth saving." "You saved me right back," Franklin said. "The ranch was just a place before you came. You made it a home." He set down the brush and pulled her to her feet, drawing her into his arms. They swayed together in the lamplight, dancing to music only they could hear. "I love you, Florence Emerson," he murmured against her hair. "I love you, Franklin Emerson," she replied. They made love slowly, tenderly, with the ease of long familiarity and the passion of deep love. Afterward, Florence lay in Franklin's arms, listening to the quiet sounds of the house settling, the soft breathing of her children in their rooms down the hall. "You remember what you said the night you proposed?" she asked. "Which part?" "That you wanted to wake up every morning with me beside you and fall asleep every night holding me. I remember. You kept your promise. Every day, every night for 8 years. And I will keep it for the rest of our lives," Franklin said. "You are stuck with me, Mrs. Emerson. I can think of no better fate." The years continued to pass in contentment. The children grew, the ranch flourished, and Franklin and Florence's love only deepened. They weathered hard winters and hot summers, droughts and storms, the usual challenges of life on a Nebraska ranch. But they weathered them together, always a team, always partners. Charlie grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch. Maggie proved to have her mother's head for numbers and began helping with the books. Henry had his father's way with animals, gentle and patient. And Alice, the baby, was sunny and cheerful, bringing light wherever she went. In the spring of 1895, Florence and Franklin celebrated their 13th wedding anniversary. The children had planned a surprise party, decorating the house with wildflowers and preparing a special dinner. "To Mama and Papa," Charlie said, raising his glass of cider. At 13, he was almost as tall as his father. "Thank you for showing us what love looks like. Florence's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, darling, all of you." After dinner, Franklin led her outside to watch the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the spring air was sweet with the scent of new grass. 13 years, Franklin said. It has gone by in the blink of an eye. The best 13 years of my life, Florence said. Mine too. He pulled her close, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Florence thought back to that desperate woman gathering kindling in the woods, half-starved and hopeless. She could barely recognize herself in that memory. That woman had been lost, adrift, alone. The woman she was now had everything: a loving husband, beautiful children, a home, a purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Franklin asked. "About how much can change in just a few years, about how one act of kindness can alter the course of a life. You did the same for me, you know. I was going through the motions of living, but I was not truly alive. You brought me back to life, Florence." "We brought each other back," she said. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Franklin took her hand. "Come on. Let's go back inside to our family." They walked back to the house together, to the warm glow of lamplight in the windows and the sound of their children's laughter. This was home. This was happiness. This was love. The widow who had been gathering kindling alone had found so much more than firewood in those woods. She had found a man who filled not just her arms but her empty days, her lonely heart, her entire life with joy and purpose and love that would last forever. And as Florence stepped through the door into her home, into the arms of her family, she knew that every hardship she had endured had been worth it to arrive at this moment, this life, this perfect happiness. The end.